much because I think Ryan will be able to elaborate far better. So thank you for being here, Ryan.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. You guys are all looking a little bit tired from all the activities yesterday, last night, and perhaps you're getting a little tired. Oh, Linda's saying no. She's ready to go. So perhaps we need to get up and have a little movement. Do you feel that way? No? You're just ready to hit the presentation? All right, then. I really started getting involved in looking at activism probably about 20 years ago. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of my background. One of the common themes of my life was that's not fair. My parents would say, you can ride your bike and you can just stay in this area. And I used to say, oh, just because I'm deaf, I'm limited to where I can go. And I was getting those kind of limitations all the time. And this is what you have to do. And I would always want to challenge authority. That was just part of me. Let me share a story with you. My siblings, I have a brother and a sister. And we would take turns every 2 weeks mowing the lawn. My brother and I, but my sister never had to do that. And when my sister became a little older, I'm like, she's old enough now, how come she doesn't take her turn? Because there's 3 of us, and that was to my benefit, right? I wouldn't have to do it every 2 weeks, I'd be able to do it every 3 weeks. And so I'd have more time to do what I wanted. But my parents said, no, she's a girl, she doesn't have to do that. And I'm like, girls can't mow the lawn? She's got legs, she's got arms, of course she can mow the lawn. So we butted heads over that. And that helped me think about society. Why we have permissions to do some things, why some things the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. It's just not fair. And sometimes that's the answer. It's just not fair. I'm sorry, the world isn't fair. And I get that, it's true. But are there things that we can change? I believe there are. We don't have to leave everything as a status quo. Back in the 20s, there was no vote for women. But they fought to change that because they didn't want to accept that status quo. And there's also lots of groups, LGBTQ community, they fought for their rights. Civil rights movement. And now we can, as deaf community, fight for our rights as well. You have to think what it is that you can do to be a part of that. And that's what's become, let's say, my thing. I'm just wondering, here in Canada, what year did women get the vote? Was it 1912? When did women get the vote in Canada? So that was before the US? Okay, one applause there. Wow, okay, so the States is behind. Oh, they're always behind, you're saying. Oh, you're pretty funny. They're slow learners, I guess. Canada's more advanced and progressive. Okay, excellent. Anyway, so that's the basis of my own essence and what I felt and saw the influence, even from my own family, just wanting to be able to challenge the status quo. And I think that's just a part of the foundation of who I am. And that was in my family life, and then I experienced the same thing as I stepped out into the world. So if we want to have a look at this image I have up here, I think it probably makes sense to you, right? It's pretty simple. We can all do our own thing. And you can make a difference that way. But when we work together, the power is multiplied, and we are so much stronger to make things happen and to change. Doing things alone is great. Everybody has a different agenda. We all have different interests. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if we want to really make an impact on certain issues, if we work together, the power is incredible. So you can see in my title here, I've got the word leverage. That's one of my favorite words. Leverage. What do you think of when you see that word, leverage? What does it mean to you? Equality? Yes, I like what you're saying. It's kind of like a seesaw, right? You know, on the playground when you were little, sitting, going up and down and up and down on a seesaw. Who's heavier gets to control, right? When you were a little kid and you were little, you were stuck hanging up in the air because the person who was heavier was controlling it. They wouldn't let you down. And then they'd say, oh yeah, sure, I'll let you do that. But again, if you have long legs, you could also control the leverage and control where that seesaw went. So size and weight gave you power. And I think even within the deaf community, we have to be able to take advantage of the leverage that we have and realize. Are we all rich? Did we come from families that had a lot of money or not? Doesn't matter. And leverage doesn't need muscle. It's not the bigger that you are, the more that you can do. We have leverage within us, which is power. What our job is to figure out what that leverage is and then use it. Knowledge is power. You need to know yourself and know your community. And know your opposition as well. Do we understand the power that they have? Do we understand their weaknesses? We've got to know what they're doing. Sometimes we don't have that information. Once we do, we have leverage, and leverage is the key. So we've got to figure that out. As well, we have to be able to understand the policies and part of the system, what they look like. Where did that decision come from? What are the dynamics involved in the system? So that's why my topic here is leverage and the power of the deaf community. It's our community, we have the power. If there's something that we want to change, we have to understand ourselves first so that we can make that happen. I love this topic, just like our speaker said yesterday, roots of resistance. I love that, the theme for DAE. Our roots. Linda talked about it, Camille talked about it, the depth of our roots. We have long, strong, thick roots in the deaf community. So when we talk about Caucasians having the power and males making the decisions, for example, Harvard, the Old Men's Club, right? And all the graduates that came from Harvard or the ones that became CEOs and presidents, and they became the root of that power. So the history of that is long and powerful. Our community isn't as deep as that sometimes, and it takes years and years and years to form those roots. And we've gone through years and years historically of all of this oppression and suffering. And now the threat is getting greater and greater. Technology is there, policies are changing, and our roots are starting to become weak. So we need to be able to build those roots and get stronger. I'm trying to get back at Linda Cundy because when she did her presentation, she gave me $2 because I had a question. So I want to encourage everybody to ask questions, but I don't have enough money to pay everybody $2 for every question. So even asking questions is part of getting back to resistance. If you ask your boss or you ask a coworker or somebody else, sometimes the question can be interpreted as a challenge. And that's because there's resistance there. People in positions of power don't like to be challenged. They don't like the questions. They like the status quo. Because you're challenging their position, their knowledge when you ask a question, and they don't like that. Or it's possible that your questions could expose something that they don't want to expose. Perhaps it exposes a weakness for them. But I want to let you know the questions are powerful. It could be an innocent question, but it's still powerful because you're getting into that resistance. Again, yesterday when Linda Cundy was talking about her apps that they were developing, and I'm so excited about that and the work that you're doing, so thank you. I think our community seriously needs the work that you're doing. But we were also talking about rhythm. And that's kind of new to me, looking at rhythm, probably within the last year or two, and I'm not sure that I have a full understanding of it yet, so I don't have a lot of the answers. But there's something there about rhythm and the value of rhythm. There's something there to me, something that perhaps has been overlooked. So I happen to be reading these books, both written by the same author, and I suggest them as a read. They're incredibly powerful. So just to summarize very basically, when we're talking about flow, there's 100 years of research about that. And I think probably you've understood this whole concept, but maybe you weren't aware of it. So, an example may be extreme sports. Or who likes extreme sports, like marathons, cycling, those kind of things? Yeah, I see some people in the audience. So let me ask you, for those of you that participate in those kind of activities, let's say running. Because I'm a runner, I run every day. So it's an easy example to talk about. So for those of you that are runners, you get that runner's high, right? I see some nods. Do you understand why? Because there's a release of chemicals in your brain. And the list is up there under the title of the cocktail. Not all of them, but specifically dopamine and endorphins, they come from that physical activity of running. So if you're training and you're increasing your ability in running, and it comes to a competitive race, there's added risk because now you're competing. Before you were just running and you're just training and there's no competition involved. But when you actually participate in a race, there's more to it than that. There's chemicals coming and you kind of lose yourself in all of that activity. You lose the sense of time. You just become one with the run. It might be a 3-hour run, but it feels like it was only 30 minutes. So perhaps some of you understand that loss of time because you're just so engrossed in what it is that you're doing. That concept is called flow. So you have to have a minimum amount of skill and then an activity that you're pushed into and it energizes you and perhaps it's more than you expect and you can accomplish things. Irregardless of how much time, you're not even aware of the amount of time. And all these chemical reactions are happening in your brain and they travel through your body. And these books talk about extreme sports. Like the ski high jump, and they do all these twists and turns and they do all this and then they amazingly just land perfectly at the bottom. They don't hurt themselves, they don't injure themselves. How is that possible? How is it possible to have that perfect performance? That's all flow. So now if I can talk about daily activities. Talk about myself. I present workshops, I educate, and I find myself in that flow as well. I do it so often, it's just innate for me, and there's always a risk of doing something inaccurate or whatever, but I'm just so involved that I don't understand. And sometimes I'm in the creative process, I don't even remember what it is that I've said. Sometimes I'm done my lecture and I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't remember. I was so engrossed in what I was doing that I don't have specific memory of that. And that's what these books talk about, and they call it flow. And sometimes we don't flow enough. And we also need to encourage our children to be able to have that experience, and it will increase their performance level, and it will increase their results. So now if I can bring that back to rhythm, which is also discussed in the book. Rhythm helps flow move faster. A lot of people listen to music while they're running and they follow the rhythm, and that becomes part of them. Sometimes when you're working or reading or whatever it is that you're doing, whatever physical activity, there's a specific cadence that you have during that activity. Even speaking. Speaking comes at a specific pattern or cadence. And I think we have that in sign language as well. Even the storytelling yesterday, I talked about Christine's rhythm in her storytelling. And we were all lost in that story because of the rhythm and the flow that was demonstrated there. Keep that in your mind. Rhythm is key. Rhythm is key. There's also other things that are related as well. You can see I have that up on my slide. There's a high percent of depression in the deaf community. We don't feel good about ourselves. Society puts us down. They want to fix us. They want to give us cochlear implants. We're never good enough as humans to the outside society. And we feel all that negative stuff. And when that continues in a community that there's a lot of depression, that's a problem. We can't energize ourselves to do anything. We turn to drugs. We get depressed because we don't have enough energy anymore. And we have to think how we can solve that problem. And I believe if we can promote and encourage flow and rhythm, that's going to help. Like running and exercise, just feeling better about yourself, then you will be a part of that flow. So I want you to keep that in mind.
Okay, so let's get to the reason why I'm here. The committee, as I said, talked about who they wanted to come as their keynote. And I said I could be here for a 1 hour, 2 hour workshop, a 1 day, 3 day workshop. And I could share all of this information and motivate and excite and inspire everybody and leave and nothing will happen. That's typical. It's typical, and I understand that that could be the result. What I decided to do is I'll come provide some information, share this information through this workshop, and stay. Stay for a little while. I'm not a community leader. I'm a community organizer. Two very different concepts, two different roles. I look to the community and look at it as a map. And so I came together with the committee. We talked about what it is that we need to do and what we need to look at here, and this is what we came up with. And a lot of the issues you're facing here in this community are very similar to what we see happening in communities in the United States. And this is just a sample of some of the things that we talked about. So Glenrose Hospital, Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital, not providing information to parents, not giving them what they need to know. Concerns about the deaf youth camp. There's issues with these seniors clubs. Resources and courses and supports for the community. Employment barriers. What else can we see here? Interpreting issues. Access to mental health. Concerns for deaf blind. Literacy in education. I mean, it's listed here. There's a plethora of issues in the community, right? It's not great. Do we have enough people, enough resources, enough energy, enough finances to fix all of this in a very short period of time? Those are challenges that we need to face, and they're ongoing challenges. Does it mean we can't do it? Does it mean we can't succumb? Or that we succumb to that? No. We take a step back. Take a step back and look at what are the key areas that we really need to focus on. If we make a change in this one area, how will it impact these other areas, and will that change flow over to other areas that we've identified as issues? So one symptom is typically, or one issue is typically a symptom of a larger issue, right? So we have to stand back, look at what we can change as the larger issue, and then move forward. Let me ask you, what are your ultimate desires? Yes, come on up. Share with us. If you could just move over here, Camille. David. Well, growing up in the community, in the School for the Deaf, having deaf parents, I really felt that coming out of school, I didn't fit. I wish there was more of the deaf world. I wish there was more to change my perspective, to help me grow and develop. Okay, stay here for a minute. So you are saying that you really want to be more knowledgeable about what it is out there in the world. Yes, well, I want to know what's out there for everybody. I think I've been influenced generally by the Hearing Society. My worldview is based on what I know from the Hearing Society. How do we change the world? I wish there were two worlds. I wish we could see what the differences were between the hearing world and the deaf world. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but all I have is the hearing world to go by. So that's one of my ultimate desires. Right. Who else has an ultimate desire they'd like to share? I think my ultimate desire is to be as collaborative as we can together. I know that we can agree to disagree, and we should be able to do that. We don't all have the same values and beliefs, but let other people try their step at something. Try to excel at something. Let's not put those barriers in front of people and put each other down. Let's try to empower one another. So that is my ultimate desire, is to be as supportive as we can to each other and to succeed and excel. My ultimate desire is, I guess just in general, when we think about a job or anybody in the community, we face is hearing people are taken aback when they see a deaf person come into their establishment or their place of employment. They don't know what to do with us. There's this unease, and I want that unease to go away. I want people to welcome us just as another human being. Okay, thank you. I would like to see more seniors or older people get rid of the bitter roots that they have, the roots that have hurt them, that they've been hanging on to for so long and that they've been looking back at. I would like them to get rid of that, to overcome and have a healthier self-esteem, move forward, look to the better for the future. Ultimately, my desire would be, I want to become unemployed as an interpreter. I, like what just Calvin said, I want people to be welcomed and ready and have access anywhere they go, regardless of being deaf or hearing. I want to see the deaf community stop hurting each other. This internal negativity, little by little, becomes worse and worse. I want to see more positive things so that our future is bright and better. My desire, oh, sorry, I'll move over, thank you, is to see two worlds come together, deaf world and hearing world, that there's no separation, that we come together as friends, as one. Just going by my experience, I had difficulties growing up in the community. I want to see the community value themselves as deaf, each other, value each other, come together, work together, be strong so that we can be successful in the future. I want solidarity, that's my ultimate desire. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of desires. I think everybody's comments are probably very similar to one another's and similar to what I have to share with you next. Just based on my experience and my involvement in various communities, your comments are equally recognized in other places, and so this is what I think we need to look at here. These three key objectives. Sustainability basically means something that can and will remain stable. So, employment. Oh. Deaf-owned businesses, restaurants, having staff that are all deaf. Maybe another business that's a technology-based business, whatever it might be. Something that can be self-sustained. When we look to children being born in the community who are deaf, that adequate information is shared with those parents so that parents can make educated and well-informed decisions as they move forward. There's support systems ready for new parents. That would be sustainability. So that ongoing support. Representation would be another one. In politics, being involved in the running, not standing back as outsiders, but being actually involved, fighting the fight, hosting the discussions, representing the values of the community. So somebody coming in and representing the community, we don't have deaf representation in the political realm. Who speaks for us there? There isn't anybody, so we need that representation. And then thirdly, really falls in line with what many of you said. You know, we want the whole world to be one world. We want to understand it in its entirety. We want to stop being interpreting. We want them to understand us. We want to work together, and people will work together when they feel good about themselves. But when there's dissension, that's difficult. When I have work, when I have community that supports me, when I have all of the things that allow me to be stable in the community, when my baggage is less, when depression is released, then you see all of that happening. If you don't have that, you can't develop healthy emotions. If you've been constantly told you can't and you've constantly been put down. If your environment is negative and continues to be negative, you won't see that change. You won't have the realization of these three objectives. I think ideological change is probably more complicated, but these other ones are pretty concrete concepts, I think. Building relationships. It does require a lot of work, but once you're there, it's not difficult. It's not an abstract concept. The ideological change is probably a little bit more abstract. Basically, it means, how does the world view us? Just like others have already come up and said, I want to be accepted in the world. I want the world to say, hey, how are you? Hats off to you. You're a person. I want them to see me as a person. We need to invest, but they're investing in the wrong thing. They're investing in, well, that's been happening for a long time. Cochlear implants is an example. That's just one step of removing the DNA strand. of people, of deaf people. They're looking for a cure. So a genetic cure to eradicate deafness. Is that what we want? I don't think so. So the current ideology is if you don't hear or don't speak, you're not human. In its simplest form. That's what it is. That's the current ideology that we are faced with today. To hear and speak is equivalent to being human. And it's funny, I was just watching Planet of the Apes. Have you seen that movie? The new release, the newest one. So the most recent film, there are humans that want to invade the community of the apes, and they want to essentially eradicate the apes. And one of the actors said, if we do not eradicate them, they will take over. And there was some type of illness that would be spread amongst the humans and then turn them into apes as well, so that they would no longer be able to speak and no longer be humans. And one guy said, if I lose my voice, I lose my humanity. That was in the movie, and I thought, oh, that's crazy, right? That's crazy. So again, it comes back to this whole thing of to speak is to be human. So we are not human in the world. That's the ideology that's out there now. That's the mindset. But we can change that mindset. Now, how do you think we do that? I think we have to use statistics. I think it's our responsibility to show that literacy rates have increased, that we're bilingual, that we do have jobs. If those stats remain low, then the perspective is going to remain the same. So that's what I think. We need to show what we can do, how successful we are. Absolutely, that's one approach, that's one way, and Linda mentioned yesterday the importance of research, current research. It's not the only answer though, right? Even if we have all of this research to bring forward, many people will just say, so? If the research doesn't fit my values, and I'm in a position of power, I'm not going to pay attention to what the research has to say. So what do we do? It's important, absolutely, but it's not the be-all, end-all solution. Let's look at what really will change the world. Communicating ideas through mass media. Really, that's what it comes down to. Films, television shows, radio, publications, typically film. There's different forms of media, of course. There are written articles, there are radio ads, there's photographs, different forms of communicating ideas. But film is probably the most powerful that can show everything in one setting. It's got the sound, it's got the music, it's got the visuals, it's got the pictures, the content, the stories, the energy, everything is encapsulated in this one media. Pictures can't show that. Radio can't always show that. But a film is a very powerful tool. Without that, in the United States, we would never have had a black president elected, ever. Without TV shows, we would never have the fight and be successful in the right for the LGBTQ communities. It's a powerful force. It shares stories. It's a narrative that can be shared through film. That's the key. That's the biggest way to enforce ideological change, through storytelling.
So all of the issues we can reduce down to these three that I have listed here. I was talking with a few people recently, and I think we've had the same issues for the past 100 years. And obviously the last 30 or 40 years, because I'm in my 40s, that's what I've experienced. I'd say, I remember even in the mainstream when I was little, seeing people complain and discuss all these different issues. Again, through my years, when I was 15, when I was 20, the issues and the complaints remained the same. As I got older, 25, 30, 40, it's all talk, and no change has happened. Because it's been the same approach that everybody's been using. It's the same tactics. So we're repeating the same thing over and over and over again. Why are we doing that without a result? What are your thoughts? Because it's comfortable? Okay. Okay, we've just accepted being oppressed. So you're saying we're searching, so we're searching for a solution. That requires courage. You have to take risks, to step out and do something different, to see what's out there. But we're comfortable staying and doing the same thing. When we talk about the revolution at Gallaudet in the 80s, who was there? Some of you were there, I know, yeah. So in 88, the Deaf President Now movement, they actually stole a bus, remember? Yeah, there's some people laughing, I see you can remember they stole a bus, stole all the buses, they let the air out of the tires, they chained them up, they put out the barriers, so nobody could leave the campus. It was blocked. And it was on lockdown. And then in 2006, we saw another demonstration. That was my time. I was involved in that. We locked the gates again. We didn't steal the buses this time, not in 2006. But we did barricade as well, the gates. Well, why did we do that? Because it worked for them in 88, so why shouldn't it work for us in 2006? We tend to look to history to figure out what works, and then we repeat it. Because it's familiar. And we realize that it was successful, so we repeat it. And we do it again and again and again and again because it's familiar and it's safe. So in 2006, when we did that barricade, it didn't work. We had to come up with something else. We realized we had to change our tactics because it was no longer working. But we tend to repeat our tactics and the way we do things because it's comfortable. But we have to take the risk to do something else. And a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that. They're worried that they're going to fail, and so they don't want to do it. We need to think differently. We need to figure out what our issues are. We have to have something completely different in our thinking. Come up with something else. We can't repeat the same things. We're going to get the same results. We want different results. We have to do something different. So that leads us to community organizing. And I'm here for another week. I'm here until September 24th. And basically, my role is to help work on community organizing. That includes the Edmonton Association for the Deaf. Let me get all these organizations down. The Alberta Cultural Society of the Deaf, the Sports Association for the Deaf, Alberta Association for the Deaf, Calgary Association, everybody, getting everybody together and talking about these items. You can see the picture at the top there. And when we're discussing things, we actually use sticky notes and post them. Talk about the organizations, who's there. One example might be the Glenrose, and so then we need to identify who's the person in charge of the Glenrose. Who talks to the parents? Where's the first contact that those hearing parents get when they find out that they have a deaf child? And I mean by name. We want to know who those people are. So I want to know the person by name in that position of power. We need to know exactly who we're talking to. Not the Glenrose Hospital, but the person who's in power, the actual name of that person. We need to have that. It might be a couple of people. We need to know. And then can we contact them by email or whatever it is? We have to figure out how we can make that connection. Maybe we need to go through the board. I'm not sure what it is, but we've got to figure out what that is. So we can look at that issue. And we can say cochlear implant is not the only choice, but who do we talk to about that? Again, we need to know the specifics in who that person is. And we need to befriend them. And we need to know, what agency do they work with? Who are their political allies? We need to get into the depth of that, and that's what the mapping is all about. Being able to map out that helps us understand what the systems are that we need to deal with. Otherwise, we're just stuck in the weeds, trying to fight our way through. We need to stop that. We need to get out of the weeds, get onto the high ground, and see what it is. In the high ground, we can see everything. And then we can form our attack, and we can see what the whole picture is. And that's what we need to do. We need to identify the issues. We need to have critical analysis about that, ask the right questions, maybe questions that we've never even thought of asking before. Just like I said, we need the specifics. We need to know who that person is, where they're from, how we can deal with them, what organizations. I don't have that information, but that's what we need to start with. We need to find out all that information. Perhaps there's parent advocate groups. Who are running those groups? That's what we need to know. Get the names, figure out what their background is. And maybe we'll figure out that, they have a contact somewhere else. We know somebody that was a classmate of theirs, whatever it might be, and make those connections, because they'll be able to understand each other better if we use the right people. So we need to get to that level of analysis. And then we have to connect the dots. We can't just identify things without connecting everything. Once we increase our understanding and we see where all those paths are connected, then we're able to come up with our strategic plan. Without that, it's not possible to come out with a plan. We need to have the full picture, the analysis and identity. We have to know all that information so that we can move on from there. Let's say we want to change policy. Perhaps we want to go to the government to talk about the Glenrose, so that we can go work that way if we want policies to change. In the US, we call it senators. What do you have here? Counselors? Are they called counselors in Canada? Your MLA or MP? An MP? Okay. Or an MLA? I see MP and MLA. So member of parliament? Okay, that's what an MP is. Okay. And the MLA is member of the Legislative Assembly. Okay, I got it. Okay, so MLA and MPs here in Canada. Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. So we've got to contact these individuals. We've got to identify who those people are that we can work with. Who has somebody that actually uses several languages at home? Perhaps that's the people to talk with. Maybe some of these MPs or MLAs actually have deaf family members. So those are the people that we should target, and we should try in partnership with them. And they'd be very motivated, and so develop that and go from there. We need to know who will be supportive of our cause and make connection with those people. Maybe you know somebody who's actually a friend of a member who's on the board. Do you know people that are in the cochlear implant business, where they're getting their money from? All this kind of thing. If we can identify these contacts, then we have somewhere to start to work with. Because everybody has their own bias. So we need to see where the money's coming from, because that will help us understand where that is. And then we can try and make the adjustments there and start to play their game. So once again, we have to identify these issues. We need to go through the critical analysis so that we can connect the dots and then make our strategic plan. And we have to be able to remove the barriers depending on the appropriate tactics that we come up with. Angela, did you have your question up? I'm sorry, you had your hand up. Did you have a question? I have to say I agree 100% with what you've been saying so far. I was in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and now I'm older in my 70s. And we need paid staff. All of the organizations in the hearing world, they have paid staff to go ahead and do this kind of work. So lobbyists, whatever it might be, but we don't have. Everything that we do is on a volunteer basis. I'm going to be buried a volunteer. We need to have paid staff that have the skills to do that. We don't have that at this time. Oh, I'm going to get $2. It's going to start me off at $2. And that speaks to sustainability. Right there, that comment that Angela shared, that's talking about sustainability. Oh, yesterday, when they were talking about cannabis and the legislation, I don't know if you were here when I asked if nonprofit organizations could get a license to sell and have a business doing that. And the answer was yes. And I asked if there was a limit on the number of licenses that were being provided for businesses, and they said no. So the only reason is that, sorry, one of the stipulations was that it can't be close to a liquor store. But I asked if there was a place that had liquor, if it was separated enough, could they actually be selling cannabis? And the answer was yes, as long as it was separate. Because here in Edmonton, you have a space, and you're trying to lease it out. So why can't you do that? Like EADCC, right? And it could be your own business, and you get the profit from that. What's wrong with that? If you set that up as a business. So that's just one idea. It's becoming legalized. Why not? Why not get in the business? And I said, could it happen in the same building? And she said, yeah, as long as there's specific separation between where the liquor is and where the business is. So you could figure out how to do that. That's just one example of a possibility for you, so that you can get the finances to become more sustainable. You could work together, hire your own staff, right? Just one idea. Talking about activism. Oh, I see Angela saying, yeah, let the young people do it. All right, talking about activism. There's a difference between activism and advocacy. Advocacy is working with already established systems and people and policies. Trying to negotiate things that are already there. Activism is doing things that aren't already established. Like the recognition of ASL and LSQ, fighting for that. That's activism. Okay, so there's two differences there. Activism and advocacy. And there's power in activism. So talking about Saul Alinsky, he wrote a book called The Rules for Radicals. That book opened my eyes, my goodness. I was a very emotional kid when I was little. I would cry quite easily at the drop of a hat. That's gotten a little better as I've gotten older, but still, you know, I get sensitive, I'll cry in a movie and things like that. But my emotion, sometimes that's negative. But how can I organize that? I was frustrated with being able to control that. I needed some sort of a structure, some way to organize that. And that book from Saul helped me. It showed me the way. It's kind of like a game. Power, I always thought was something that other people had. That I didn't have any power. I thought that my whole life. Well, I didn't have a lot of money, I wasn't rich, I didn't have the contacts, I wasn't political, But everybody else had it, not me. But the book said, everybody has power. And power is the ability to act. That's it. That's it. Can you think? Then you have power. Can you walk? You've got power. Can you talk? You've got power. Can you write? You've got power. Can you say no? That's power. Can you say yes? That's power. Everything. Do you have a beating heart? You've got power. When your heart stops beating, you don't have power, but you've left a legacy of power for somebody else to work off of. Everybody, every one of us has power. Let me share a story with you. At the Michigan School for the Deaf, where I was working at the time, they were refusing to recognize ASL, American Sign Language, even though we had the documentation and the research that it was an actual language, but they refused. We brought them all that documentation. They still refused. Oh my goodness, we fought back and forth. I was so irate about it. But I got to the point, after reading the book, realizing that I had power. So I decided to go on a hunger strike. And I know that the school could always twist my words, as other people can. They talked to the media, and they were trying to break me. You know, they were saying that they could punish the students, and then I would feel bad about it, and they went on and on about their list of things that they could do. But the one thing they couldn't do was force me to eat. And that came to me because I was trying to figure out what was the power that I had. I was trying to figure out, you know, how can I stand up for the community? I'm just another Joe. What is it that I could do? How can I impact the community? So I sat at the front of the school and decided that I wasn't going to eat, and what could they do about that? They had no power to change that. I thought, I can't do much, but this is what I can do. I control what goes into my body, and so I did. I wrote emails, and sent them out to the students and everybody that I worked with, explaining what it was that I was going to do. I had people that wrote articles and disseminated those, so that it would counteract all the lies that the people in power were sending out. So I did. I went on a hunger strike for a week. I refused to eat, and I sat at the front of the school. I could not believe the reaction that I got. It blew everything up. The state reacted. I was on the state news. The cameras came. They're like, oh, poor disabled deaf man, he's hurting himself, not eating. Oh my goodness, what's going on? What's happening? Why are you doing that? Why are you refusing to eat? And I was like, okay. The school's not recognizing ASL as a language. We've got students that end up in jail. They can't go to college and university. They're not getting jobs because their education is not on par to everybody else. So I went on hunger strike so that I had a platform to share these issues. And so I got the airtime. But I need to tell you a secret. Because things. I know I did refuse to eat. That was my strategy, but I had a tactic. Obviously, I didn't want to die. I wasn't not eating so that I would die. I wanted to be able to continue the fight. And I knew that I needed to understand my opposition and my enemy. And that was the state of Michigan. And the culture of my state is heavily into gaming and hunting. You know about juice fasting? Maybe not as popular here. Let me repeat that. Yeah, for juice fasting. Are you familiar with that? No? You're not familiar? It tended to be like the hippies and those kind of groups that would do that. I think it was around 2002 that it started in the state of Michigan. So I refused to eat, and I didn't eat anything, but I was drinking. Okay? So I would drink juice. And they weren't familiar with that. So I could maintain my energy, because I was true to my word, I didn't eat, but I was drinking juice. So when people came and they did interviews, I was honest in saying that I wasn't eating, but I could still articulate myself, and I had the power. I lost weight, yes, for sure, but that's all. I made sure. Oh yeah, you're saying I'm already thin. Well, that's true. But I made sure I could maintain my power to get my platform out. So you have to figure out what it is that you have for power. And figure out the perfect tactic. And my tactic worked. The superintendent of education and the deputy came to meet me at that time. Oh, I also have to, I forgot to mention something else. I also knew that, as in all of the states, at that time, well, I was in my 30s at that time. I didn't have my master's at the time. I didn't have a degree. But I thought that wasn't important. The credentials that I had were not important. But I knew that they would just look at me as a child in their perception. Because they don't have the ability to see anybody with a disability on par to themselves. It's an ideological thing. They can't see me as an equal. Therefore, I know that they'd be very compassionate and, oh my goodness, here's somebody that wants to hurt themselves. Because they would look at me as a poor child. And I wanted the attention. I wanted the media to pay attention to me. I didn't want to be ignored. And I knew that they wouldn't, because of their compassion, because they'd think, oh, look at this poor deaf man. It's so terrible, he wants to hurt himself. Shame on the state of Michigan for allowing that to happen. Basically, that's where I was going. Anyway, the superintendent and the associate superintendent came. And the first thing that they said, oh, we're so concerned about you. We want you to start eating. What can we do to help you start eating? Please let us know. They talked to me like I was a kid. And so I knew that I had picked the right tactic, because that's exactly what I expected them to do. So I wasn't worried about that. But I talked to them about the issue, about the lousy education that was being offered, and how kids were not on par with everybody else in the general population. And I said, and that's your responsibility. I'm holding you personally responsible for that. Nobody else. You. So if you won't do anything, I will remove myself from the front of the school, and I'll come and camp out in front of your house. I don't have a problem doing that. I'll starve and die on your front lawn. And they were like, oh, okay. So Let's make an agreement so that you'll start eating. So we'll look into things, we'll organize meetings, and will you start to eat? And I said, as long as it happens, because the moment that I see things falling apart and it not happening, I'm coming back to sit here and stop eating again. So I made that agreement. And true enough, 6 months later, things started to get into place. They started doing more things. And it was successful. It worked.
And then, of course, I left, and the people of the community in Michigan did not continue to advocate for those changes to maintain. So things kind of became, unfinished, right? Once you get that check mark, it doesn't mean that you're done. You still need to have the plan to sustain that change. How to keep those people from holding on to the accountability. Keep the momentum going. But that experience, I have to say, was a very rich experience for me. So again, that's why the work is never done, as I had stated up here. And then at the bottom, in quotes, you'll see, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain, except death and taxes, right? And we know that. Guaranteed, we are born and we die. That's a for sure. And we also know that we all have to pay taxes. So I'm going to add to this quote, and you see here in the red. And there's always an infinite game of power. Always. When you think that you've completed something and you've had success, you're not done. Look at America. It's a perfect example. We've got Trump. Perfect example. Obama went through and did all kinds of things. It was fabulous. 8 years, we were guaranteed that Hillary Clinton was going to come in and things would carry on. We weren't worried. They'll be continuing with the same policies. They'll carry forward. And lo and behold, we turn around and we've got Trump. And he's got this attitude. Oh, no big deal. We can never be too comfortable with this. Never. We have to watch him. Always. Be on your guard. So I want to go back and emphasize this here, critical pedagogy. That's education. Critical pedagogy, critical thinking, extremely important. People who aren't deaf have a lot of options. I'm not sure how it works here in Canada, but in the US we've got public school, charter school, arts and science school, private schools, and so forth. You can hire one-on-one tutors. There's a variety of options for the general public. The options are not as plentiful for people who are deaf. We can go to school for the deaf. We can be mainstreamed in a public school with interpreters that may not be qualified or may not have any services provided to them. Can anybody communicate with the child? Probably not, maybe not. Does the school for the deaf have qualified teachers? Do they use teachers that are fluent in ASL? Are the teachers, supportive and encouraging and believe in the child's ability to develop and excel? Critical pedagogy is not strongly rooted in deaf education. In the US, again, I don't know about Canada, but what I see in the US, I think there's one course at Gallaudet that touches the surface of critical pedagogy. It needs to be rooted in all courses. It needs to be ingrained in every course, but it's not part of deaf education and the value of deaf education. It's not emphasized. That's dangerous. If kids can't be critical thinkers, how can they resist? How can they challenge the power? So, how do children or people have basic skills to discern whether they're being oppressed against, what they can do to stand up and fight, what's happening in the world around them, how they navigate, how to negotiate? That's dangerous if they don't have those skills. Our work is never done in this area. We always need to have people, there's always people trying to work the system. want more money, more toys, more oil, more vacation homes, more. They want the best of the best. They want more of something. They're never satisfied. Some people are never satisfied. They always want something more. And if you're available, they'll take advantage of that. For sure they will. Somebody is always trying to take something away from other people. Always. So if you're aware of that, you can prevent that from happening. You can say, no, you're not having my assets. Get away. Not on my watch. It's really important that we understand this. That book that I read helped me understand. Understanding the self-interest. Let me see if I can describe what that means. What's good for you? More pay? An increase in wage? Sure. More nicer clothes, more comfortable clothing, a better parking spot, so you don't have to walk so far. You can park right at the front door. An office space with a window. A position where I get to make decisions, where I can affect policy change, where I can manage money, finances. A place where I can order better food, whatever it is for you as an individual. What is good for the self. And what's good for the self leads to self-preservation. Our basic instinct is to preserve ourselves, to save ourselves. If we are feeling threatened, we feel as though somebody is going to hurt us, right away we fight to protect ourselves. That's basic human behavior. That's what self-interest is. And there's a range. At the same time, I have self-interest, but I also want to make sure that others are okay. But we have another group that has a different perspective. It's all about me. It's not about you. I don't care about you. Everything I do for me is for me, not for you. So there are those people too. What do we do with those people? Again, just thinking about what happens in the United States, and a story here. A teacher of philosophy, first day of class, she asked the students, gender inequality in relation to pay, how do we fix that? And you need to know, the pot of money can't be manipulated. Okay, same pot of money every year. This is what it is. Okay, so you have the same dollar amount to work with. Pay scales have been established, so you get $50,000 a year, they're going to get 58, you'll get 48, 38, whatever it is. Everybody has an established salary amount. Again, you have a pot of money, you're all getting the same amount of money, what you get is what you get. Now, we've got gender inequality in terms of pay. Okay, well you've worked here 10 years, and let's say this person over here is 6 years, and you've got 12 years, but the person with 6 years experience has a PhD, the person with 10 years experience has a master's, so difference in education for sure, higher credentials. The person with the PhD is getting paid less than the person with the master's. And the reason is because the person with the master's is a man. The person with the PhD is a woman. So have a look at that. So she wrote all this on the board, presented different challenges, and asked us, how do we resolve this issue? Well, we all sat back for a minute. We were, not sure. I was looking at the board, trying to think about a few things, and then I raised my hand, and I said, well, I'd be willing to give up my pay. Logically, it makes sense to me. Same pot of money, same parameters. Really, there's only one choice. It's our decision to give up our pay. We have to put the money back into the pot. And then redesign how that money can be distributed based on credentials, based on quality of education, degrees, whatever it is. And the teacher said yes. So I got my point. But there was others in the class that said, no, I work hard for that money. I'm not going to give out my pay. I earned it. There's got to be another solution. Would you be willing to give up your pay? Again, it's self-interest. Are you willing to give up your pay? Maybe, maybe not. So if you're an administrator and you're hearing, and you have all deaf staff underneath you, would that hearing administrator be willing to walk away from the job? Give up their money to allow a deaf person to come in and take that position? Not likely. If you're working in a deaf community, would you be willing to use ASL and have an interpreter? But you can hear the interpreter making all kinds of mistakes. They're not really understanding what you're signing. This is very similar to the experience we have today. Right now, we don't know if the interpreters are actually saying what it is I'm up here signing to you. I hope to God they are. I know we're all watching the cart and we're seeing, is it true? Are they catching it? But the same idea. And hearing people often again in that position won't trust the interpreter, would prefer to speak for themselves. So, again, really not realizing that deaf people don't have that choice. So these are things I want you to keep in mind. You have power. Challenge things that you feel need to be challenged. Make an agreement, some changes. If I change some things, I know it'll impact you, but I want to reduce the impact on everybody. So if I get a little bit of an increase, and you get a little bit of a decrease, it's not going to hurt you so much overall. Come to an agreement. Maybe the person will be willing to negotiate. And again, you all have power. Whether it's your mind, physically, mentally. It's important to understand the aspect of power. If you're looking for change, everything's always on the table for negotiation. We need to think about what we can do, the tactics. Power is the key to the change that you want to see happen. So we've identified the issues. Once we do that, we've got our map set out. Then we want to identify the obstacles. What are we going to face? What are the challenges? And what obstacles are worth pursuing and what are not worth pursuing? So, in the US, and looking at the schools for the deaf, the schools are governed by the states. And changing that is difficult. Changing anything, it's all to do with hierarchy, all to do who's rooted in the community, the administrators, things that are status quo. And those who have qualifications to become administrators, well, the numbers are very small. You bring in a person from the deaf community, but they don't understand the political games they need to play. They don't have the experience. Or you can bring in a hearing person who has that experience, but they don't understand the culture of the community. So it's catch-22. Which is the better option? Is it better to establish our own school, separate from the one that's already there? Or is it more important to pursue the issues and try to break down the barriers? So you have to decide which ones you want to pursue, where it's worth the investment of time. Or do you need to think of another path to take? Sometimes you're faced with a barrier or an obstacle and you get to that place and you realize, is the time, the energy, the resources, the community support, the skills all there to battle this barrier? Maybe not. So maybe we need to take all of that and invest in a new path, So we're going to find a new way to do this. We're going to work around the obstacle to get to what we need. It might be better, a better use of our energy, a better use of our resources, who knows? But you have to be able to identify that.
When we talk about the word system, what do you think of? Like, we always blame the system, right? It's just there. That's the system. Can you explain what that is when you talk about the system? What is it? It's power, okay. But when we talk about the system, we actually say, well, it's the system. Yeah, you know how the system is. But we never identify what we're talking about when we talk about the system. What is the system? What is it? Everybody underneath? So what created the system? Power, okay. What is the system? Structure of, okay, but a structure of what? The departments, agencies, people, okay, we're getting there. People. It's people, not a department, right? Because there's no department if there's no people. Okay, so people is part of it. People is part of the system. The system is the people. Okay? Plus the policies, and it's the people that create those policies. And it reconfirms, the policies reconfirm the people that are in power. Okay, it's also money. And where they prioritize the money to be spent. So the people in power decide that this amount of money goes here and this amount of money goes there, and it's all about the people, the policies, and the money, as well as the ideology, right? The beliefs that those people hold, what their values are. So really there's 4 parts, and those 4 parts together make the system. If you can change the people, you can change the system. If you can change where the money goes, you end up changing the system. If you can change the policies, if you can change any one of those 4 parts of the system, you're changing the system. That's it. So don't just talk about the system. Talk about which specific part, the people, the regulation, the funding, or the ideology that you're talking about. Now let's talk about an example. Trump, he's an easy target. If we get rid of Trump, do we get rid of our problems? No. The system created Trump. So obviously we aren't clearly understanding the system enough. The whole issue with Russia and Putin and all that kind of stuff. They're intertwined in the system. So the intrusion that was happening from Russia is part of the system. If we can separate that, then you're changing the system. Where the money goes, and if you can control where the money goes, that it's not going into the wrong hands, then you have more control of the system. So if you get rid of Trump, there's still more work to do. The tax policies, for example, where the US is prioritizing the spending of their money, reducing the misuse of money. They're investing in our election system, like cyber attacks and all that kind of stuff, because they're getting money for that. So that's all part and parcel of the system. If we can identify all these little parts, then we can reduce the effects of Trump and be ready for what happens next. Because Trump is just a symptom of a bad system, and that we have all in part been a part of creating that system over time. You've all seen this sentence before, follow the money. You're all familiar with that concept. If you can identify an issue, you still can't understand the problem specifically unless you start to follow where the money came from. Who's funding that problem? Who's paying for that problem? Track it back to where the money is from. And then normally you'll be able to find the answer. So mapping helps us understand the system. Yeah, so about half an hour. I'm good. Yeah, 30 minutes, right? Perfect. Let's talk about framework. Just today, Sean Bradley sent me an email talking about an MLA that's coming tonight, I think. I'm not sure if it's confirmed, but we're hoping that they actually come. But this MLA sent an email with their notes because they were going to talk about something tonight. And so that was nice. It was nice that we got that email. That would never happen in the States. But here in Canada, I guess you're a little more polite about that. So that was pretty nice. We got that so we can understand what he's going to talk about before he comes. And so in that attachment, we were surprised to see, Sean told me, that he said he valued all deaf and hard of hearing individuals. And he supports better opportunities for the deaf, providing more services and specific training to teachers, and increasing the education in the deaf community. And not increasing, and increasing the number of educational audiologists. But he's saying that he values all deaf and hard of hearing people, which is very impressive. And Sean also explained to me that you still have a very strong old way of thinking here. So it wasn't anything new to him, but it was new to me. So just the fact that he was talking about educational audiologists was what I was talking about. Most people would look at that and say, that's great, that's positive, but we know what that means. That's a framework that they're working from. That's just one example of their perspective being different than our perspective. That we interpret that differently, the deaf community versus them. But as a deaf community, we still have a framework. And we have issues with those frameworks sometimes. How do you sign the word deaf? And how do you sign hearing? So what's the difference? What do you notice the difference between those two signs? Hearing, we sign it like this, because we're talking about it's an ability, because they can speak, that's why it's formed where it is. But deafness, it's about what we can't do. So just within our own linguistics, we've separated that hearing shows the ability that you can do something, and deaf is showing the ability that you can't do something. And that's just part of our framework, which is okay, that's fine, but we need to acknowledge that. It's such a tiny, tiny thing. It's pretty minute, but it's all part of us. And sometimes we overlook that. And there's negative consequences. We have to think about what else we overlooked. Linda Cundy was just talking about how we reference things and we put them in a higher level than us sometimes. Without even thinking. Just the way we position our language. We talk about the hearing world at a higher level than us, and we usually talk about the deaf world being lower. It's visual, but it has impact. That's part of our framework. We need to acknowledge that. How we use language and the meanings behind it. They're all ingrained. It's an integral part of everything is figuring out our framework. If we blindly go ahead not worrying about what that is or identifying it, that's a problem. We need to figure these things out. We need to figure out the linguistics that we use, whether it be part of the movie industry, whatever it is. There's so many symbolic things out there. How we design things, how we set things up, how we position things. Even how we arrange our seating, little things. Do we sit in rows? Or do we sit in a horseshoe so we can see everybody? It shows our values. It shows what's important to us and what's not. It shows our choices. Who we invite, who we don't invite. That's all part of a framework. How much time we spend with a certain person versus somebody else. It's not just language. It's our complete being and our consciousness. That's our framework. And it also shows our values. So you've got to take a good look at all of that. So you've got to get down to business and recognize all these things. And when you start working on what your framework is, you're going to notice that and you're going to figure that out. Yeah, come forward maybe. I just wanted to let you know you've only got 10 minutes left, so just helping you out with your timing there, your time management. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm almost done. So let me ask you, do you know your framework? Let me give you another example, kind of a funny example. The disability framework, or what? And then the word inclusion. Okay, so inclusion and include, right? So it means to be included. So to be included requires what? It's kind of hard for me to see you because of the lighting. So do you mind coming forward? So including depends on where you're signing it. It's not, I decide who's included and who's not. So I can permit you to be included and someone else is permitting me to be included. So if you were including somebody, that means you're inviting them. You have given them the invitation if you're including them. So you've invited them to participate in something. And sometimes we are invited. But do we have to wait for that invitation? I think sometimes we're waiting for that invitation. And do we need to do that? So if we're waiting for that invite, where's the power? I'm giving them the power, it's not my power. So the word inclusive is quite ironic because it shows the power. It's kind of odd when you think about it. You want to create an inclusive environment. Great, but you're still using the word inclusive that's not inclusive because you're including specific people, not everybody. So we need to see and unpack everything and figure out what it is and see what it is that's behind everything. So the disability framework, because of the foundation that's already rooted, sometimes they can't help themselves because of how it's rooted. They're like the agency. You have to think of your own worth, that you have worth. It's not in the disability framework. It's nowhere in there. So the idea of inclusion, when a family has a child that's disabled, the parents are also part of that framework. How does that impact me? And how does the larger framework impact me as a parent? What am I going to give to my kids? And when you think about that framework, as a member of the disability community, maybe you can help me. tendency to think is that they're gonna help me.
So those are some framework examples. Let's look at tactics. Tactics are fun. You can be creative, thoughtful, and one story I think is really funny I'll share with you. So Saul Alinsky, famous man in the US many years ago, and often members of the Black community would contact him from Chicago, New York, whatever, invite him to come and speak. And one time there was, a big company in the US, and Kodak, you know, the big photo company. Okay, so they were there and being very oppressive towards the Black community, not allowing them to move up in the chain, giving them promotions, and so Saul was invited. The community wanted to invoke change, and he came up with a tactic that I still laugh about today. I think it's so funny. It was very clever. So what he did was looked at the culture in Rochester, New York, got it figured out, and came to some conclusions. And at that time, women typically stayed home, took care of the kids, took care of the house, men went out to work, right? So, and you know, women have money, men bring home the money, and then women have money to do their thing. And so often, you know, women would go to the opera. That was one thing they did. And they had an opera house there. The Black community at that time bought 100 tickets, and opera tickets are expensive, so they figured out what they could afford. They brought together their funds, and they were able to afford to purchase 100 tickets. So they brought those in and decided to host a picnic, outside of the opera house. There was, you know, some grounds and you know, nice place where you could picnic for the day, and music and whatnot. And they only brought one thing to eat, and it was beans. Baked beans. That was it. That's what they brought to the barbecue. So that's part of their culture, I guess, their food culture, and that's what they brought. So it was all day eating baked beans. When it was time for the opera, the 100 seats that were part of that community, they went into the opera, and it got a little smelly in there. A lot of women could not enjoy themselves. They were angry. They went home. They said, "You need to fix this," to their husbands. "I'm not happy with this." And so the husband of this one woman said, "Okay, okay, we're going to fix this." He went back to work, and what did he do? He gave people jobs, gave them promotions, allowed them advancements in the Kodak company. So Saul went in and said, "Create pressure, and you're going to make change." And that's exactly what they did. So when you come up with a tactic, if it's not fun, it's the wrong one. If it is a drag, and it drags you down, like the Gallaudet protest, that was quite a drag. People got tired, right? If it's not fun, it's not going to work. It's not a good one. Essentially, I want to say that's the principle of it. So understanding personal power and how you use it as a tactic, and how you decide what tactic you're going to do or use, has everything to do with what you've got. Do you have a lot of money to buy airtime, to put your promotions out there, to access the media, to invest? Do you have a lot of money to do that? If you can manage that, that's fine, but tactics takes you to the political realm, communicating, that kind of thing. If you don't have that money, your tactics will be very different. So it's always depending on your resources. Remember I spoke to you about what I did as my tactic was a hunger strike. My level of risk, of course, was increased. It was risky. I mean, I found other ways through that, right, to do the juice fasting and whatnot. It reduced a little bit, but the less resources you have, the higher your risk level is. The more resources you have, the lower your risk. It's a basic principle. So that's how you can view tactics. That's how you should see tactics. And again, I'm going to reiterate, you have all the power. Last night, remember I was up here showing you my little improv performance, and I tried to make a point last night though. My point was was to try to identify who has skills in the room. And we all have skills in the room. Everybody has a gift to offer. We all do. What that gift is, I don't know. You need to figure that out. But you all have something you can bring to the table. The more you invest in your skills, the more power you will have. And it always comes down to confidence. If you're confident with yourself and your abilities and your skill, you create more long-lasting result. It's really, really important to believe in yourself. Couldn't put that out there any other way. You cannot continue to be negative, and you will then perpetuate the system that's out there that we already have. There will be not a positive result in change. So don't allow those negativities to be placed on you. Okay, the time is now that it's within your power to recognize what changes you can make different decisions, make different choices, and move forward. Are you ready to work? I'm ready for questions. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciated it. Thank you. Oh, yes, you can turn that camera off. Sure. Sure. It's fine. Go ahead and turn it off.